Now it's time for the monetization. If I come to RevenueCat, let's create a new project and add an App Store app. Let's enter our bundle ID. And remember, if you don't know where your bundle ID is, in your App Store Connect, in the information, it is this bundle ID here. And then we have to have this App Store Connect specific shared secret. So if you look at this information, it's got really nice instructions. So I want you to read this, and it's even got these screenshots to tell you exactly what you need to do. So this is what I'm following. So let's go to our App Store Connect. And if you scroll down this section here, so it says the app specific shared secret is a unique code to receive receipts for only this app's auto renewable subscription. So we need to do this for the subscription. So let's generate this secret key. And I want you to copy this key and then set it in the RevenueCat. It's looking good. And if I just keep going down, you can see you got the in-app purchase key configuration as well. So required for the most accurate pricing and country-specific data for your App Store transaction. After uploading this key, you may see updates to your historical data. So if you just go to the Learn More, again, it's got really specific and clear instructions on what you need to do. So I'm always going to show you the documentation because this will have the most up-to-date information. And if you have any questions, then you should go to this documentation. Now you can see it's telling us to go to the users and access and the in-app purchase section. So just coming back to the top, we need to go to users and access and go to the integrations. And you can see I've already generated the key for me, but you can click on this plus button and I want you to generate a new key. Okay, once your key is generated, it will appear in the active keys and you get one shot to download it. So for the name, I'm just going to call it Pro Subscription Key, and then you'll have some sort of key ID and you can download it. Now, I've already downloaded mine, so I don't have a link there, but you should have a download link. And then if I come back to the RevenueCat, I want you to paste it or upload that P8 file that you downloaded and drag it here. And you only need to do this once for the very beginning. So after that, any future apps that you want to use, you can see here, I can just use my existing key. So if this is your first time doing it, just download this key and then upload it here. And we have these two fields to fill out the key ID and the issuer ID as well from our App Store Connect. Cool. And then the last thing we need to do is this App Store Connect API. So an App Store Connect API key is required if you want to import products into RevenueCat. Have product price changes automatically and applied. So this is a really recommended step to do. Well, actually, it's required. So if we click on the Learn More, again, it's got all the appropriate instructions in the documentations with nice screenshots. It says here, the newly created key needs to have at least the access level of App Manager. And then once you download the P8 key file, take note of the issuer ID, and we're just going to upload it to the RevenueCat. So let's do that in our App Store Connect API. Again, I've already created my API keys, so you can go ahead and create one for yourself. Again, once you download that file, just upload it here. And so I've already done that. I'm just going to use my existing key, and I want you to fill out these things. Awesome. And then let's hit save, and our app is created successfully. Now coming back to the App Store Connect, if you scroll down to the subscriptions, it says here the first subscription must be submitted with a new app version. So create your subscription, then select it from the app's in-app purchase before you do the app review. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our first subscription group. I'm just going to call it Pro Subscription. And let's create our subscription. So I'm going to have a monthly. And for the product ID, you can see it's a unique alphanumeric ID. So you can just call it whatever kind of unique ID. So for example, my app's name is Moonbase. So let's say Moonbase_pro_month. And we can select a subscription duration, let's say 1 month. set up the availability. I'm just going to do every country, and then you can select a price for yourself. And let's confirm it. Cool, and then let's save this. And I'm going to create another subscription for the yearly. And just pick a price. Awesome, and let's create this localization. So the display name, I'm just going to call it Moonbase Pro. Awesome, and coming back to our RevenueCat, if I go to the entitlements, we have to create our first entitlement. So what this means is giving people like access, right? So I'm going to call it Pro, and the description is just Pro access to all features. And let's add our first product. So you can see here, if I select the app, and then we got the add product. So this is why this setup was so useful that we did at the beginning to connect to App Store Connect. We can now just import products automatically. So you can manually do this and fill it out, but I'm going to click import products. And sweet. So there's the two things from our App Store Connect. Beautiful. And coming back to our entitlements, we can now attach these two products. Sweet. So we got the entitlement with our two products. And then finally, we have to set up this offering. So you can see here, it says it's optional, but it's a recommended feature of RevenueCat that can make it easier to change and experiment with your paywalls. So I'm actually going to go hit learn more. And again, I'm always going to show you these documentations so that you can go and find the most precise information. But I can show you how to do this real quick. So let's hit plus, and the identifier, I'm going to call it just the default. And let's say the standard set of packages. And let's create a new package here. So the first one is just monthly. Let's just call it monthly subscription to Pro. And then let's add our product. Cool. And let's actually add another package. So this one is for annual, right? It's for the yearly subscription to Pro. And select our year product. Beautiful. So finally, we have these offerings that we can now go use in our app. So let's come back to our code, and I'm going to create a new feature called subscriptions. Let's create a new file called RevenueCat service. We need to add the package. So Flutter pub add purchases Flutter. This is the RevenueCat package. And so if you import it, yeah, we want to use that package. Now let's create this RevenueCat service class. And I'll show you how to do the main things here. So starting with the configuration, we just need a API key. And what we're going to do is await. Let's go to the purchases and configure. And then we can give it our API key. And I'm also going to just print it in the debug console. RevenueCat configured successfully. And if we have an error, let's print that as well. Now for the fetching offerings. So let's go to the purchases and get offerings. That's how easy it is. And then we can just return it. and then purchasing a package. So let's just have the package as a parameter and go to our purchases, and you can see that purchase package option. And then we can just return the customer information. And another useful thing is just a boolean to see if this is a pro user or not. Right, so if I go to the purchases and you get the customer information, I'm just going to write a little comment here just to show you what's actually happening. If you look at the customer info and the entitlements, we can go to the active, and then this will return a map of the active entitlements, where the keys are the entitlement IDs that we set it up in RevenueCat, right? So let's create our boolean is pro, and we're going to go to our active entitlements and see if we have that pro key. Coming back to RevenueCat, we want to look for this particular identifier, I believe. And if it's all good, let's print and see if this user is a pro or not. And that is all the code that we need for the RevenueCat. Now I'm going to create a new folder here for our different layers, right? We've got the presentation layer, and let's create our Cubit. And let's actually create a data layer as well and just drag our RevenueCat service into that folder. And let's create the subscription states and the subscription Cubit. So starting with the states, we're just going to do what we did before. So like the initial, we got the loading state, the loaded state. And if it's loaded, then we should be able to know if this person is pro. And the error state with a message. And I think that's probably all we need. And then we can start to fill out the Cubit. So this individual Cubit is just going to have one purpose, which is just checking if the user is pro or a free user. So check pro status, and we're going to just emit the loading state. And we're going to go to the RevenueCat service that we just created and check if this person is pro. And then once that's done, we can emit the loaded state and then pass through the is pro status. And if we have an error, let's emit the error state with the message. Cool, and that's all I want to do for that one. Now I want to create another Cubit for the offerings and the state as well. So separating these out will make your code nice and easy. Now for the offering states, it'll be quite similar. So we got the initial state, the loading state, the loaded state, which means if it's loaded, then that means we should be able to see what packages are available. And if we have an error, let's see what the message is. And I'm going to have a couple extra states here for the purchase loading and the purchase error. And I think that's all good. Actually, in the offerings loaded state, we are actually holding on to just one package, but we have two packages, right? So it should be a list. And let's just call it packages, because we might have more than one package. And let's come to our Cubit. And remember, this Cubit is responsible for fetching and purchasing offerings from RevenueCat. It's a good idea to cache the loaded packages so that we have it stored locally. And I'll show you how to fill out the main sections here. Starting with the loading the offerings, I'm just going to emit the loading state first. And let's go to our RevenueCat service to fetch the offerings. Now, if the offerings is not null, and the offerings that we have currently is not null, in other words, if we have an offering, then let's try to add them. So starting with the monthly package, let's try to add it if it's available. And let's add the yearly package as well if it's available. Cool, and then at the end of it, let's emit the loading state and load up the packages. Now this first if statement is just checking if we have an offering. Now if we don't have any offerings available, then it'll just be blank. And we can load up those offerings. Cool, and just emit the error state if we have any errors. Nice, and finally we got the purchase package. So for the parameters, I just want to know the package that I'm purchasing, of course. And also let's have a function for when it's successful, right? So let's just start by emitting the loading state. Let's try to go to our RevenueCat and purchase this particular package. And it will return the customer information. And if it's not null and we have a per entitlement for that person, then we can execute this code. So after purchase, let's call on success to let the app user know that it was successfully purchased. Okay, I'm going to add in a couple of more specific error catches here, right? If the error code happens to be the purchase cancelled error, what that means is the user cancelled the purchase flow. So they were looking at the new packages and they exited out of it. And if that's the case, let's just revert to the last known offerings and load that up. And at the very end, let's just catch the generic error as well. And that should be all good. So that's the Cubit done. Now coming back to our main.dart file, we have to include our new Cubit. So we have these Cubits so far. We got the auth, moderation, and post. Let's now add in the subscription Cubit. And beneath that, we also have the offerings Cubit as well. Cool, and then if I come down here to the block consumer, you can see in the listener, right? We are listening for an auth error. Now I want to also listen for authentication. So if the state is authenticated, so like someone just logged in, we want to check this person's pro status, right? And that's what we got the subscription Cubit for. And let's print it to the console just so we know as well. So if I open up my debug console and I just refresh this, you can see like these things that it's printing out helps us know what's actually happening in the different states of the app. And it looks like we have an error here. So error checking pro status. It's missing the plug-in exception and for that particular package. Oh, yeah. So since we included a new package, let's kill the app and rebuild it. And we have this error from the CocoaPods. So it's got the updating dependency problem. So this is a common problem when you add a new package on iOS. And I think I showed you guys how to fix this previously in the course. So we're going to do the same thing here. So what we need to do is we need to change the directory and go to the iOS. And we need to remove the pod file. Let's pod deintegrate. So what this does is it just deletes the entire pod file. And then I'm just going to pod install repo update so that we can just get everything from scratch. This way we can guarantee that we have all the updated packages. And once that's done, just say Flutter clean. And finally, Flutter pub get. Hopefully we have no issues and everything is looking good. All right, so let's try to build our app now. And great, so we're checking the pro status and we have a new error now. It's saying purchases have not been configured. Oh, yes, let's actually do that. So remember, we had an API key that we actually meant to give it. So in our data, let's create a new file called RevenueCat constants. And this is for the API key. And now this is going to be unique for every individual person, right? This Apple API key for RevenueCat. If you come back to your RevenueCat and you see the API keys, this one here that you have, you're going to need to copy this one in. And then in the main function, we need to configure the RevenueCat just at the very beginning. So let's await it, go to the RevenueCat service and configure it with our API key. Beautiful. So I'm going to kill the app and just rebuild it. And it's rebuilding and it's built successfully. Beautiful. And you can see it says RevenueCat configured successfully. We're trying to do our authentication and we're checking the pro status. And then it's saying pro user is false, which is what we want. Everything is looking good so far. Now I want to come to my home page and I want to show you how we can try to monetize our app. Right now, there's different strategies we could use. And so for example, right, like a very key functionality of this current app is just making a new post. And so let's try to restrict that particular function to only pro users. And so what I'm going to do is let's try to make it so that the user wants to add a new post. We are going to check the pro status. And so only pros can make a post. Let's call this handle add post. And let's firstly get the current subscription state from the Cubit. Right, if the subscriptions are loaded and the person happens to be a pro, then we can proceed to add post. Else, the user is not a pro, then what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the subscription dialog to make them consider subscribing. So let's create this dialog now. So let's say pro subscription required. Only pro users can post and comment. Please subscribe. And then in the actions, we're going to have a cancel button. As well as a subscribe button. Now, when I subscribe, what I want to do is just pop the current dialog, of course, but then let's also navigate to the offerings page, which we haven't created yet. So let's create that now. So let's just start with a simple app bar and come back to our home page, and let's import this new offerings page that we created. And let's see how this goes. And so with this new handle add post method, let's replace that here for the icon button. And so if I click on this plus button, you can see in our debug console, it says we are not a pro user. So if I hit the plus button, you can see, yeah, it shows this prompt saying that we need a pro subscription. Sweet. And if I click subscribe, then it takes us to the offerings page. Beautiful. Let's start to decorate this up. So firstly, we need to have the URLs for the privacy policy and the Apple's end user license agreement. So it's required for us to have these links on this page. And so let's bring in the links later on when we're done coding it up. And let's also have a helper method to launch the URL so that the user can open up like a web page. So to do this, let's open up our terminal and add in this package, Flutter pub add URL launcher. This is just a very popular package to use. And you can see if I say launch URL, yep, there's our package. And for the launch mode, let's say external applications. So it'll just open up the Safari browser, for example. And then in our build method, let's grab our subscription Cubit. As well as our offerings Cubit. And we're going to load the offerings as soon as the page is built. And just to decorate this up as well, let's just grab the color scheme from our theme. And we can now build out the UI. So in the body, I'm going to use a block builder with our offerings Cubits and the offering states. And so we have these different states. So starting with the loading, if we're loading, let's just return a circular progress indicator. If it's an error, let's display what the error message is. And when it's loaded, then we can now get the available packages. Now, if the packages is empty, then let's just say that there are no offerings available. And if we do have some packages available, then we're going to return it in a list. Cool, so let's get each individual package. And let's also get the billing period, or maybe the subscription duration. So if you go to the package and the identifier, let's see if it contains the keyword year to see if it's a year or month subscription. So if I come back to my RevenueCat and I go to my packages, you can see these are the two packages, right? So I'm just checking when the identifier, I believe this is the one. So we're just checking if it's a year or a month. And then let's just return it in a card UI. And so in a column at the top, we can have the package title. And then below that, let's have the package price. And then below that, we can have the package duration. Cool. And at the end of this, we can actually have a default fallback. So just by default, I'm just going to have a loading circle. And if I save this, yeah, you can see that it showed up with our two packages. Now the price I think is good. Now I don't know why it says for the duration, it says month for both, right? Like let's actually include the duration in the price. Let's say price and then dash the duration. So everything's working fine except for the fact that for the month, it's month, but for the yearly, it's also showing month. So that means something is going wrong with this package identifier. Now, this is where it's helpful to just kind of debug to see what the problem is. I'm actually just going to print this identifier and let's see what it's actually saying. So if I refresh this and I go to subscribe and I go to the offerings page, there it is. You can see what it's printing out, this monthly and annual. So it's actually meant to say annual, not year. And if I save this, yeah, beautiful. So it's now showing the correct duration. So if I come back to my RevenueCat, it looks like this is the identifier that we're checking for. So yep, let's say that. And then now we can just decorate it. This is just the fun part. So I'm going to go ahead and style it to my liking. You can obviously decorate this however you want, but I'm just going to style this up and add some padding and some margins. Cool, and then beneath this, we need to have a button to subscribe. So let's use like a green color and say subscribe now. And for the text, let's actually make it white. And bold. Sweet, and then if I press on this, then let the offerings Cubit handle this part. Cool, so to make our code nice and organized, let's actually do that at the top here. We're gonna create a helper method to handle the purchase. So let's grab our qubits again. And initiate the purchase using our offerings qubit. We can purchase the package. And then after successful purchase, let's refresh the subscription status. And let's wait until the subscription state shows that the user is pro, and then we can close the page. So if you go to your Cubit, we can listen to the stream. And the first time that the sub state is loaded, and the person is a pro, then I just want to pop this screen. Beautiful. So this handle purchase method, let's come down here and pass it on to this subscribe button. And this is looking really good. Looks like we didn't really use this one, so we can get rid of this. And let's refresh the page. So I'm going to try to subscribe. And beautiful, it's telling us to sign in with our Apple ID. Cool, now if I cancel, it looks like it's just stuck on the loading screen. And I thought I handled the loading part in our offerings Cubit. Let's have a look at the purchase package method. Yeah, so this little bit of code, the user canceling the purchase flow. Let's just copy this, and actually we should put it also here under the successful purchase if statement. Yep, so if it's unsuccessful and the user just kind of cancels the flow. So let's just try this again. I'm going to refresh the page, try to subscribe and cancel. Then yes, we just go back to the previously loaded packages.